Hey, guys. Good. I was told the mayor is here. Is the mayor here? What's that? Oh, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know on relatively short notice. This evening, I'm joined by the man to my left, the president and CEO of NJ. Mr. Mayor, say hello to you. Mayor Raz J. Baraka, thank you for being with us. This evening, I'm joined by the president and CEO of NJ Transit, Chris Kolluri. You'll hear from Chris in a minute. He will help explain the current status of negotiations and how we are stepping up to help New Jerseyans get where they need to go in the event of a strike. First, a little bit of context, if I may. Over the past several weeks and months, our entire administration, and especially Chris and his colleagues, have been working around the clock to avoid a strike and keep NJ Transit operating at full capacity. As always, our single highest priority is keeping the trains running and providing the best possible service to our state's commuters and taxpayers. Now, let me be absolutely clear. Here in New Jersey, we are honored to be the quintessential organized labor state. In our efforts to preserve that reputation, NJ Transit proposed an initial contract that was agreed upon by 14 of the agency's 15 labor unions. Every single one of them, except the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, otherwise known as BLET. That overwhelming level of support from nearly all of the union workers employed by NJ Transit is as good an indication as any that it was a fair deal. And just last week, Chris and his team also signed a 4-year agreement that is consistent with the established pattern, and that's important, with the largest union at NJ Transit, the Amalgamated Transit Union. They represent, by the way, more than 5,500 NJ Transit employees. The point is, in terms of context, our administration has been working in good faith to provide the wages and benefits that our employees at NJ Transit deserve. And I'll be the first to acknowledge that all of the agency's employees, including our locomotive engineers, are the backbone of New Jersey's public transit system. But the workers and families who rely on our transit system every single day are the backbone of our entire economy. And any possibility of abandoning these workers and families, our neighbors indeed, at the last minute would be completely unacceptable and unjustifiable. Now, I don't want to get ahead of Chris or his colleagues who are working and still are working 24/7 to reach a resolution. But I will say this, like many mass transit systems across the nation, NJ Transit is facing a sobering fiscal reality. That is a challenge we must balance with paying our engineers and every NJ Transit worker what they deserve. In that spirit, back in March, Chris and the BLET's representatives shook hands on a contract that would pay engineers the same hourly wage, give or take literally 10 cents an hour, as engineers with the Long Island Railroad. In other words, it would have given their members almost exactly what they have asked for, being paid the same wage as engineers at other transit systems in our region. And crucially, that contract would have provided our engineers their hard-earned raises without blowing up NJ Transit's budget. Indeed, at the time, BLET's general chairman, Tom Haas, even called it, and I quote him, a fair and fiscally responsible, quote, contract. So while the BLET's members ultimately rejected that agreement, this much is without dispute. We must reach a final deal that is both fair to employees and at the same time affordable for New Jersey's commuters and taxpayers. Again, we cannot ignore the agency's fiscal realities, because you want to know what would happen if we did. Just look across the Delaware River and see what's happening with SEPTA. Due to the agency's ongoing fiscal challenges, officials in Pennsylvania are now talking about cutting SEPTA services by 45%, while at the same time also hiking fares by 20%. Can you imagine that here? Reduce services at a higher cost. That is not something the people of New Jersey can afford. Our administration has worked relentlessly to put NJ Transit on stable fiscal footing. Doing so has required some really tough calls and compromises from all of us, lawmakers, workers, employees, employers, paying the corporate transit fee, and especially our commuters and taxpayers. So now we need the members of the BLET to step up and meet their obligations to the people of New Jersey. Let's get back to the table and seal a deal. And let's move forward on meeting our most important responsibility of all, serving the needs of New Jerseyans who rely on NJ Transit. With that, I'd like to turn the podium over to Chris, who can share specifics on the steps he and his team are taking to help the people of New Jersey get where they need to go in the event, especially in the event of a strike. Thank you. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for your leadership and your trust in the agency to make sure we carry out our mission to make sure that the 350,000 daily riders get from their place of home to work and back safely and efficiently. That has been our mission since the first day. It will be our mission till the very last day of this administration, and I'm sure beyond. For those of you who have heard me speak on this subject in the last several weeks, I've said, thanks to Governor Murphy's guiding principle, that any deal we strike must be fair and fiscally responsible. It's not an either or. It is a conjunctive. They both have to be met. And that is the spirit in which I've approached these negotiations from the very start, going back to my first week on the job. As early as this past Monday, we were invited by the National Mediation Board. Both parties voluntarily appeared in front of the board, precisely with the intention of reaching this fair and fiscally responsible deal. In fact, I said so much to the board when I met them. I said, that is the only thing that matters in these negotiations. So what has happened since? I want to credit the General Chairman where credit is due. The last 4 days, we worked tirelessly together to try and figure out whether we can reach precisely this deal. It shouldn't be that hard because we did it once. And we did it once in just over a few weeks. And that is after this particular union has been fighting with New Jersey Transit for well over 7 years. So we certainly, I thought, did something that was right, which is adhere to what his objectives were and still adhere to what the governor has always stated as recently as his budget address, that he intends to leave this state in a fiscally sound manner so that no other governor, whether it's next year or years from now, will be holding a fiscally irresponsible package that we negotiate. That's the fundamental issue. So in the last several days, we tried to get to this deal. So where did we end up? We started with the proposition that the General Chairman always has said, that I want to make, my members want to make a wage that is comparable to what the other agencies make. I don't quite agree with the notion that somebody who lives in New Jersey and works in New Jersey should be entitled to make a wage that is as if they live and work in New York. But so be it. I took him at face value that that was his objective. So we then worked towards that goal. And in fact, in the last day, and especially a few hours ago, maybe even a few minutes ago, my clock is a little messed up at the moment, thought we actually got pretty close. So the dispute is not about whether we can actually bridge the gap between what he thinks his members are entitled to and what we think they are entitled to. The problem or the challenge that currently exists is the second part of the principle that we just cannot ignore. There is no point in providing a compensation structure to a group of my colleagues which ultimately ends up bankrupting the agency. And you may ask, why is that? They're such a small group of people, how could they possibly bankrupt an agency? And this is how, and I've said this over and over again. Unlike any other transaction, a union negotiation is inherently about if one union gets a better deal than the other, the one that did not get a better deal is automatically entitled to that compensation. It is called a Me Too clause. People can shout from the mountaintops and say, oh no, it does not apply here. And I could tell you, and I'm sure the mayor has seen this in his in our own city, that is just a fact of how these negotiations work. So where did we leave it? I said to them just a few minutes ago, and by the way, I said to them, I'm going to say this to you, so this shouldn't be a surprise to them. I said, I respect the offer they put in front of the table. I respect the negotiation they undertook with me over the last several days. And I respect the fact that we came close to reaching a wage rate that they think they're entitled to. Those are all facts. Where we could not bridge the gap is this Me Too clause. There was no way in which the structure that was proposed by the union could ever allow me to not invoke, or not me, the other unions from invoking the Me Too clause. That is basically where the dispute stands. So I'm going to suggest to you that this is not a lost cause. This is an imminently achievable deal. In fact, when I left them, I said, I hope we continue talking about this. And the National Mediation Board has reached out to us already. And because I had invited them to be part of the negotiations these last 3 days, they've already said, let's meet on Sunday morning and to see if we can pick up where we left off. And I think that's a good sign. Because just as the governor has said, no one, especially this governor, wants to see the 350,000 riders live distracted. Neither do I. But we have a contingency plan should the union decide to strike. But what I want to assure you is my commitment to Governor Murphy and to you is to make sure you understand that I am not leaving the negotiating table. I never will. Because ultimately, this is an achievable deal. We just need to make sure now we do it in a fiscally responsible manner. Because the consequence isn't just that some other governor who's to follow Governor Murphy is going to be responsible for that financial package we leave them, but the impact could actually cascade onto the riders who will be required to pay more in fares, or businesses who may be asked to pay more in corporate transit fees. That simply is not an option that we can support in this negotiation. So that's where we are, and I wanted to make sure, Governor, I thank you again for giving us the ability to go and negotiate in good faith, and I want to assure you that this privilege that you afforded me to run New Jersey Transit is not something I take lightly. It is not an entitlement. I understand the obligation I have not only to you, Governor, but equally important, if not with all due respect, more importantly to the riders. That is what I'm trying to do every single day, and I will not yield on my commitment. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your leadership. That's all we have. Any quick questions, given the hour? Please.
So I'm not clear. Do you believe that they're
Sorry, we're going to ask you to speak into a microphone. I apologize.
Pat McGeehan from the Times. Do you believe that they're going to walk out at 12:01 or not?
That's their call. That's not ours. That is entirely their decision. Fair to say?
Yeah, they have not informed us otherwise.
Please. Sorry, again,
Hi,
thank
Governor
you for...
Murphy. Mary Lynn Buckley from 1010 Wins. We just received an email from NJT locomotive engineers who have just announced they are on strike. So what is your reaction to that?
Not shocked. We were hoping for the best. We're prepared for the worst. Chris can get into the details in terms of contingency plans. But I would say above all else, our door is wide open. It was never closed, and it is not closed as I stand here. We are willing to sit, to talk, negotiate at literally a moment's notice. Do you want to talk about contingency plans at
Yes,
all?
sir. Look, as the governor correctly said, we did not. It is up to the union to make this decision, and they've made it. And but as the governor said, over 2 weeks ago, we announced a plan that was months in the making, that essentially provides a contingency plan for those folks who need to get to work. As I will repeat this fact, 72% of our rail riders typically get to New York. About 40% of our bus riders typically get to New York. What will run in this strike now? Amtrak will continue to run. PATH will continue to run. Our buses will continue to run. Our Access Link will continue to run. Light rail systems will continue to run. And the ferries will continue to run. In addition to that, we are going to have a supplemental bus service that are connected to the main stations like Newark, and also 4 park and rides throughout the state of New Jersey that will feed people who need to get to work. For the rest of them, we're going to ask for your patience, and if you're able to work from home, we really would ask you to do that.
If I may hit that last point, if you can work from home, certainly tomorrow, and you're watching out there, that would be a really good day to do so. Please. Thank you.
Can you speak to the National Mediation Board? You've been in touch with them. Is there any interest from Congress or to intervene, to impose a contract? Have you gotten any sense on whether or not they want to intervene in this?
Yeah, I'll start, and Chris can come in behind me. First of all, I think the fact that they've reached out to both sides and invited a session for Sunday morning is a good sign. So that is a good sign. I'm hopeful that the union will take them up on that offer. I know NJ Transit will. And they've proven to be a valuable convener in this process. Nothing from Congress at this point, although we're speaking to members of Congress. We're taking any advice and counsel we can get, and we'll continue to do so. You want to add?
That's it. Governor, the only thing I would add is Congress has the right to intervene should it decide.
Please.
The Me Too clause that you were talking about. So are you saying that the contracts with the unions say that if you give an X% raise to the engineers, every other union automatically gets that percentage raise starting immediately?
Yeah, it depends on the term, right? So if let's, and I'm just going to give you an example. If an agreement that we struck with BLET says that a raise would go into effect outside the pattern that everybody else has already signed on to, and it doesn't specify that the increase is strictly for something they and only they can do, then it automatically triggers this Me Too. That essentially starts a process for which every union, 14 out of the 15, will come with their letter, and they all have a letter that essentially says this. It's just basically, in normal language, it's called in most nation-favored nation status. So essentially, they just come with this letter and they say, you gave them this, we would also like it. That starts the clock.
And it turns from something that is maybe a single-digit million or a low double-digit million fiscal reality into a 9-digit fiscal reality. And that's something that NJ Transit can't bear and we can't justify. Again, you've got 350,000 plus neighbors, commuters, our fellow workers. Their commute is at stake here. And we've got to make sure we treat that above all else. I think we had one here. Thank you.
Sorry about this one. You said you promised to fix NJ Transit or it would kill you. It looks more broken than when you took office. Can you talk about that?
It's not more broken. That's just a false premise, with all due respect. The progress has been enormous. We just talked about the NJ Transit Board yesterday approved the final approvals for entirely new rolling stock in the train side. On-time performance, safety, customer satisfaction are all up meaningfully since we took office. That doesn't mean we haven't had bumps in the road. This is clearly a bump. Last June was a bump. I think we've taken, and Chris has done a fabulous job in his first number of months at the helm. And there's a big team of NJ Transit folks with us tonight. It's a really strong team. And I would just dispute the premise of your question completely. Again, that doesn't mean we're perfect, so don't get me wrong. But no transit system is.
Could you
Look
just
at my
bring
example
us-
of SEPTA. Look at that for a moment. 45% reduction in service, 20% increase in fares. None of that's happening here. Please.
Could you just bring us into the room? You made it seem like that you were very close, or pretty close. Why couldn't you get there? And are you at your best and final offer here?
Yeah, so I'll give you the sort of 10,000-foot answer, and Chris and I have been back and forth probably 20 or 30 times every day for the past number of days, if not weeks. Remember the two balancing objectives here: a fair deal for the union and a deal that does not blow up our fiscal reality, either at NJ Transit or more broadly at the state. I think Chris said pretty clearly the former is largely, if not entirely, within reach. But the manner in which it was left does not meet the second objective. And I'll leave it to Chris to say what does that mean in terms of how far from an actual deal. But we could not abide by the current state given that second objective of not blowing the fiscal picture of NJ Transit up. Any color on that?
Yes, sir. The only thing I would add to that is negotiations sit on a continuum. They don't sit in a finite time period. So I think it would be correct to characterize this as there's been a pause in the conversations. That's the way I view it, because I certainly expect to pick back up these conversations as soon as possible. If they're willing to meet tonight, I'll meet them again tonight. If they want to meet tomorrow morning, I'll do it again. Because I think this is an imminently workable problem. The question is, do they have the willingness to come to a solution? And Governor, with your permission, I just want to, and this is a commentary I want to add to the previous question. I've now been involved in public transportation and mass transit for over a quarter century. There's not been a single governor, and I've worked for 5, who has ever fully funded mass transit in its 45-year history. Never. And there's never been a governor who's committed to modernizing the entire fleet of rolling stock by placing the order by the time he leaves office, so by 2031, the entire fleet would be modernized. No other governor has done it, and in the history of this 45-year agency, it has never happened. So if you want to talk about metrics, that is a good metric to look at.
I paid Chris a lot of money to say that. We had a very good experience into the Shakira concert at MetLife tonight. We need to break because Chris and his team are literally headed out to MetLife to make sure the experience out of the Shakira concert is as good as the one in. Does anybody have any last second questions? Yes.
Forgive me. I mean,
You may strangle someone here.
Well, I know. I'm going to try not to clothesline anybody. I just wanted to just, with absolute clarity, understand what happens now. It sounds like you're still somewhat far, at least somewhat far apart. You don't have a deal. Does that mean there is now a strike? Is it imminent? Is it happening? Are they walking off the job?
Well,
where are we?
I was just told by this woman that they sent them. That's their decision, not mine or Chris's. That's the union's decision. It sounds like they've made that decision. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Okay. Again, we've been hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. And I would say unequivocally that our doors remain open. Let me just say that unequivocally, including tonight, tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, certainly. We are going to remain open to sit, discuss, negotiate, to do whatever we can to bring this to a positive outcome, which is, again, meeting both objectives. A fair deal for them, and a deal that does not blow up our fiscal reality. Real quick, if you could.
Lastly,
We got to give you a microphone. I apologize.
Hi, sorry. So when NJT just left the table to come over here with you, you did not know they were planning to walk. Are you surprised that you're finding out this way that they issued a statement to the media instead of telling you while you were at the table?
No, not at all. And I think we said that we were expecting that, but so we're not surprised by it. That's their decision. They have a right to take that step. We've got, Chris and I have to worry about 350,000 commuters and neighbors in our state. Again, our doors will remain open, and we're going to do all the contingency steps that Chris has alluded to. We got Lily, one more, because I got to let you go. Actually, Chris is doing the encore with Shakira.
Hi. Does pattern bargaining play a role here?
Pattern bargaining?
Correct. Does it play a role here?
Very much so. No need to elaborate. Thank you all very much. Thanks for coming out on short notice as well. Deep thanks.